Hey everyone, Colin Wilson, senior writer with the Action Network, and we are here to talk about how to create power ratings in the world of college football. We get a lot of questions about where do I start. There's a lot of talk about power ratings. How do you make them? How do you adjust them? There's plenty of questions, and it's hard to just put that out in a tweet. So we're going to talk about now about how to create your initial set of rankings. Talk about how the things that are important, some of the things that aren't important, some things you should weight higher more than others. So we'll go ahead and get started here. With a little PowerPoint we created. All right, so this is how to build a power rating system in the world of college football. It's much different for the NFL. It's really different for the NBA. This is specifically just for college football. And this is going to help you kind of dive in as deep as you possibly can from a recruiting standpoint, from a returning production standpoint, talking about the transfer portal. How do things called like Havoc affect the numbers for the power rating that you're going to have? And really, is the conference that you play in, does that kind of give you a head start on where your power rating actually should be? And we're going to talk about, a lot about median and mean, which are two different things. So let's talk about creating an initial set of power ratings. I rely on six different aspects to go ahead and get my power ratings created. I adjust them in the off season, and week to week is different during the actual season versus what I do with them in the off season. So really, you can kind of take this as sort of an off season look about what you would do with a power rating if you were to create it from scratch. Now, if you already have your own power ratings, maybe something this you could, there's something in this that you could take with you and add that to your power rating set to make it more efficient, to make it more transparent as to what's going on with the program. I know that, for myself, that I've been working on all these different aspects of creating a power rating. And at the same time, I've been trying to pick up a couple of coding skills along the way to help me better analyze some of the numbers in the advanced statistics proportion. So let's start off by talking about conference divide, program mean, coaching staff, roster production, recruiting, and advanced statistics. Conference divide really says, do you get a leg up because of the conference that you play in? And, that is setting boundaries on each conference. Of course, if you play in the SEC, you're going to have a higher average power rating there than if you were into the MAC or in the Sun Belt. And I can tell you that, it could be a wide range, it could be a small range. The Sun Belt is generally pretty small with the exception of App State. And then, there's other conferences where it's extremely tightly wound, or there's one team that's just way ahead of the curve. Facilities, growth, location. This is really important for universities that have grown year after year, and group of five teams that want to be power five teams, the Central Floridas of the world, the Houstons of the world. You think about Houston and the facilities they have. More importantly, the location they are as a you know as it's relative to recruiting. You have a college in Houston, Texas. You're going to get some pretty good recruits in your backyard. Not so much if you're the Eastern Michigans of the world. So conference divide is pretty important. It is geographical. There are boundaries, and that kind of applies to the numbers that we're going to create. Program mean. What that means is mean is in two different meanings. Average power rating over a variable amount of years. So a median could be, something that you think of with a Clemson. So a Clemson may be power rated over the ACC, but the median team may be somewhere in the middle, but nowhere close to Clemson. The mean is the average power rating, and that could change, over a number of years. So a program mean we'll get into specifically with Notre Dame because they had one year where it doesn't truly define the program where you only have 4 wins when most seasons you're at least a contender for the college football playoff. Coaching staff is a big deal, a really big deal, and I don't think it gets given enough credit as far as coordinators go, strength and conditioning coaches. We saw LSU hire a passing game coordinator, not even an offensive coordinator, a passing game coordinator, and it made a world of difference. And now with the departure of a quarterback, which goes into the recruiting portion of this, and the departure of a passing game coordinator, we'll see how it affects LSU in this upcoming season. Roster production, really big deal. Returning production, transfer portal, it's all about what you have coming back. It's all about what you've been able to gain in the portal. More importantly, it's a term that's used in baseball, which is VORP, which is value over replacement player. So if you lose a Joe Burrow at LSU and you gain a Miles Brennan, how much of those stats are you trying to make up? Can you make up those stats? Is it 50%? Is it 75%? It's really important to be able to gauge that, even though if you're Iowa and you lose AJ Epinesa on the defensive line, what do you have behind that to come back and replace those stats? Recruiting is a big part of that. Average power rating over a variable amount of years, generally over the past 3 years. Recruiting is, there's a huge tie to who wins in recruiting and who ends up winning a national championship and who ends up contending for the college football playoff. And then there's advanced stats, your efficiency, your explosiveness, your havoc. We'll get into the success rate, the field position, the ISO PPP, can takeaways, and with the havoc rating, how often are you sacking? Are you getting pressures? What about your pass breakups? Things like that. Those are all very important. And when you combine that with returning production, you can get a good handle on what team is going to be hot right out of the gate. So let's move on to the first slide, which is power rating. And we're going to start off with conference divide. Now, based upon the mean and the median, that'll define a tier per conference. Your Power Five conferences are obviously higher than your Group of Five, although I would argue that the bottom of the ACC is going to be around the top of the AAC. So you'd say a Central Florida would beat, somebody like a Boston College. Basing a tier off mean will be skewed with outliers. So really, like Clemson is way ahead of the pack in the ACC. Kansas is so much far below everybody else in the Big 12, and Akron kind of had a season this past year where they were below everybody in the MAC. And you need to add median for adjustments. So just because the average in the ACC is a certain power rating number, a lot of that's going to be supported by Clemson. So you have to really kind of pay attention when you have those outliers in the conferences where somebody is ahead of the rest of the group. Independents should really mimic programs who are like in recruiting and enrollment and a 10-year PR mean. Now, what I mean by a 10-year PR mean, Notre Dame has had some years where they have been in the top 10. They've had some years where they fell down outside the top 40. There is a median for them, and you need to compare them within their 10 years to other teams that have the same kind of recruiting, the same enrollment size, the same pipeline and recruiting. Generally, their mean is a 10-year average. At the same time, you can expect them to bounce back if they've had a low season, and you can expect them to come back to a certain power rating like they did this past year after they went to the college football playoff 2 years ago. So I have some example structures over here. So for my power ratings, and generally there's a lot of power ratings out there, right? I mean, Sagarin will go up, a team that's the best in the nation may eclipse 100. And with SP Plus, I believe they have negatives, like half the teams are negative. So really it doesn't matter what the actual number is. It's what the actual number is for a team in comparison to its peers. And that's what's really important here. So like from Alabama to Vanderbilt, you're going to see a huge gap here, a 37-point gap from Alabama to Vanderbilt. Clemson to Boston College, pretty big gap. Ohio State to Rutgers, same thing. And then you get down to like the MACs of the world, and Bowling Green just had a terrible year. Can't compete with some of the upper tier teams. But I will say this, as far as the AAC, the Mountain West Conference, the Conference USA, Sun, MAC, it's easy for those Group of Five teams and those programs to flip it all around. Could be a good recruiting base coming in, could be a good transfer process, could be a coach that's been in place for a long time, coordinators that have been in place for a long time, and schedule helps. UAB is about to embark on another season where I think their strength of schedule is going to rank dead last in the country. That's a good thing for UAB, and that's kind of what happened last year. Their schedule was the easiest in the nation. That's going to happen again this year. So all of that plays a factor here, but the range is really important. If you take, for example, say the AAC, you'll see a range of 52 to 35. Well, that 52 would, for Central Florida, would put them behind just a few teams in the Big 12 whose cap is at 60. So, if you take UCF at 52 and you have Oklahoma at 60, then on a neutral field, you'd say Oklahoma would beat them by 8. So that's where power ratings get really important. It's not exactly if the number's negative or if the number's over 100, like some other famous power rating systems. It's more of how do you define it and separate it from your peers. So program mean is something that we talked about, and I mentioned Notre Dame before. And program mean is defined as school's average power ranking at the end of the season. Injury, strength of schedule, coaches, player transition, it's all going to contribute to a power rating variance distant from the mean. Take New Mexico this season, for instance. Danny Gonzalez has long been a great defensive coordinator under Rocky Long, some Arizona State time, and now he's going to be the head coach at New Mexico. Sure enough, his defensive coordinator is going to be Rocky Long, who comes in as the head coach over at San Diego State. So, New Mexico is one of those teams where the coaching situation got a huge bump in the offseason because you have an up and rising defensive coordinator being joined by really his mentor in a 3-3-5 scheme. So, injury plays a big part of it. You never know when someone's going to get hurt or how healthy people are. Justin Fields was banged up at the end of the season for Ohio State. His mobility was in question. Leaving the pocket became a problem for him. Never was a problem before, just happened to be a problem when he had some lower body injuries. Strength of schedule, we talked about UAB. That all defines the program mean. The power rating regression is the act of pulling a number back. And that's where I kind of look over at the Sagarin rating for Notre Dame over the past 10 years. You can see a high cap of 2012 at 91.08. You can see a low cap of 72.95 in 2016. 2016 was just an abysmal year. We had some problems with the defensive coordinator. We had some problems with injuries. It was just one of those seasons that Notre Dame couldn't get it together. And their strength of schedule is always top notch. They're always playing the best teams in the country, the USCs and Stanfords of the world. So Notre Dame is going to have those years where they fall in here at 72. Just because they fall at 72 at the end of 2016 doesn't mean that you start them in 2017 at 72. There's a mean for these guys, which means there's an average that Notre Dame is always going to come back to. So you want to have a regression to the mean as it applies to your power rating. So no, when 2016 Notre Dame happens and it's at a 72, I don't start them off in 2017 at a 72. If their average is 81, 79, you can see there's a lot of 79s in there, then I'm going to bump that 72 at the end of 2016 closer to what their mean is, just based upon program history, based upon recruiting, based upon coach transition, things of that nature.